AI Regulation 2026. Board accountability for shadow models versus banking innovation speed. This is a strategic briefing. The 2026 AI governance mandate, shadow models, and board accountability. As we enter the 2025 to 2026 supervisory cycle, the global banking sector finds itself at a critical structural crossroads. The tension between the acceleration of artificial intelligence and the rigidity of regulatory compliance has shifted from a technical debate to a core fiduciary concern. For the C-suite and the board, the implementation gap is no longer a peripheral issue. It is a material risk. Regulators across major financial hubs, from the SEC and the Fed to the ECB, MAS, and the HKMA, are moving past general guidance into enforceable mandates. We are witnessing the transition of AI model risk from a theoretical exercise into a direct line of personal liability for senior leadership. The core challenge lies in the proliferation of shadow models, AI systems operating outside the formal three lines of defense. This lack of centralized visibility creates a profound vulnerability in an institution's risk profile. Failing to bridge this gap carries significant costs. From capital add-ons under Pillar 3 disclosure requirements to the potential loss of permission to operate in key jurisdictions. This briefing examines the transition toward active governance, where continuous AI compliance monitoring becomes a prerequisite for institutional stability. We will explore how to reconcile the drive for innovation with the mandatory requirements of Basel III, SR 11-7, and the EU AI Act, ensuring that your organization remains resilient in an era of heightened supervisory scrutiny. The evolution of governance is the first pillar of this transition. Historically, financial institutions have relied on static model risk management, or MRM, frameworks. These were designed for linear, predictable models. But the nonlinear, adaptive nature of modern AI has rendered these traditional approaches insufficient. Today, a high-level AI policy is simply not enough. Regulators are demanding proof of effective oversight at the granular level. They are looking for a comprehensive materiality assessment for every algorithmic decision point within the firm. Wait, look at this. In early 2025, a Tier 1 European bank was served a formal notice by the ECB regarding its use of an unvetted large language model for internal credit sentiment analysis. The model was being used as a co-pilot by junior analysts. However, because it was a shadow model, undisclosed and unmonitored, it had not undergone a formal MRM review. The bank could not prove the model's logic was free from bias. The result was not just a fine. It was a mandatory overhaul of their risk reporting, leading to a visible drop in their operational efficiency during the remediation period. This is where the technical becomes the fiduciary. From a boardroom perspective, AI governance is now a matter of duty of care. In the eyes of the regulator, the board is responsible for the systemic integrity of the institution. If a shadow model causes a market distortion or a breach of consumer trust, the defense of technological complexity will fail. The board must ensure that the three lines of defense are empowered to identify and halt any unvetted AI usage. Accountability cannot be delegated to the IT department. It must be a standing item on the Risk Committee's agenda, focused on closing the transparency gap before it becomes a legal liability. The second pillar is operational resilience. In 2026, resilience is no longer defined by your uptime, but by your algorithmic integrity. As AI is integrated into the plumbing of banking, from liquidity management to trade execution, the risk of a sudden, catastrophic failure increases. This is the specter of systemic contagion risk. If a model drifts or behaves erratically under stress, the impact can cascade across the balance sheet in milliseconds. But here is the real danger. Most institutions still treat AI as a standalone tool rather than a systemic dependency. Without model inventory automation, your chief risk officer is effectively managing in the dark. You cannot have resilience without visibility. Regulators in the US and Switzerland are now signaling a requirement for algorithmic kill switches. The ability to instantly neutralize a model that has breached its risk parameters without collapsing the business process it supports. Consider a recent supervisory case in New York. A mid-sized commercial lender integrated a third-party AI for real-time fraud detection. The model was high-performing until a sudden change in consumer spending patterns caused it to overcorrect, freezing tens of thousands of legitimate transactions. Because the bank lacked a robust manual override and a continuous AI compliance monitoring protocol, it took 48 hours to restore service. The reputational hit was immediate, and the OCC subsequently mandated a significant increase in their operational risk capital. For the C-suite, resilience is a capital preservation strategy. Under Basel III and Pillar 3 disclosure mandates, your operational risk profile determines your capital efficiency. Unmanaged AI risk is a direct threat to your Tier 1 capital ratio. Leadership must move beyond disaster recovery into model resilience. This means investing in the infrastructure that allows for real-time drift detection and the immediate isolation of failing models. If you cannot demonstrate control at speed, you are fundamentally unresilient. This brings us to algorithmic transparency. The black box era of AI is being dismantled by legislative force. Article 10 of the EU AI Act and the MAS FEAT principles in Singapore have set a new global standard for explainability. It is no longer acceptable for a model to be accurate but opaque. Every output that has a material impact on a client or the market must be defensible. You must be able to prove the lineage of the data and the logic of the weights. Wait, look at this. In Japan, the Financial Services Agency recently conducted a cross-sector audit of AI-driven wealth management platforms. They discovered that several firms were using self-learning models that had evolved so far from their original training that the developers could no longer explain their current logic. The FSA didn't just issue a warning. They demanded a full suspension of the models until an independent materiality assessment could be verified. This wasn't a failure of the AI, it was a failure of transparency. From a boardroom perspective, transparency is the primary safeguard against algorithmic bias litigation. In the US and UK, we are seeing a rise in class action suits targeting discriminatory outcomes in automated lending. The board's primary defense in these cases is the transparency trail. If you can produce a clear, institutional record of your model's decision-making logic, you satisfy your fiduciary obligation. If the model is a black box, the board is effectively assuming unlimited liability for every decision that machine makes. Transparency is not a feature, it is a legal necessity. The final, and perhaps most overlooked, pillar is third-party risk management, or TPRM. The vast majority of AI innovation in banking is being delivered through external vendors and cloud providers. But here is the real danger. Many executives believe that by signing a contract with a Tier 1 tech firm, they have outsourced the risk. This is a profound and dangerous fallacy. Under global banking standards, you can outsource the function, but you can never outsource the responsibility. Regulators are now demanding that TPRM frameworks be AI-specific. This means you must have the right to audit the vendor's model training, their bias mitigation protocols, and their data privacy standards. Without model inventory automation that includes your vendor stack, your institution is carrying silent risk. You are essentially tethered to the governance failures of your suppliers. Consider a recent incident in Hong Kong. A major retail bank used a third-party AI for its Know Your Customer checks. The vendor made an unannounced update to the model's underlying architecture. This caused a massive spike in false positives, locking thousands of legitimate clients out of their accounts. The HKMA's investigation focused not on the vendor, but on the bank's failure to perform continuous AI compliance monitoring on its third-party provider. The bank was held solely responsible for the systemic disruption. For the Executive Committee, TPRM is about digital sovereignty. You must ensure that your institution is not a hostage to its vendors' black boxes. This requires a shift in procurement and legal strategy. Your contracts must mandate transparency, and your risk teams must have the technical capability to perform an independent materiality assessment on every external model. In 2026, the strength of your AI governance is only as good as the weakest link in your supply chain. As we look toward the 2026 regulatory horizon, the message for the global financial sector is one of active governance. The transition from the theory of AI risk to fiduciary liability is complete. The implementation gap is where systemic crises are born. The institutions that bridge this gap today will be the ones that have the regulatory license to lead the market tomorrow. To mitigate your current exposure and ensure institutional readiness, we recommend 3 priority executive actions. First, implement a centralized model inventory automation system. This must include every internal model and every third-party AI service currently in use. You cannot govern what you cannot see. This is the first step in eliminating shadow models. Second, pivot to a model of continuous AI compliance monitoring. Move away from point-in-time audits and invest in the dashboards that allow for real-time oversight of model drift and bias. This should be a core component of your Pillar 3 disclosure reporting. Third, conduct a top-down materiality assessment of your AI fiduciary liability. This is a task for the board and the C-suite. You must define your institutional risk appetite for AI and ensure that your 3 lines of defense are empowered to enforce it. The era of AI innovation at the expense of governance is over. The era of the governance-enabled bank has begun. By aligning your speed of innovation with your speed of oversight, you are not just complying with the law, you are protecting the future of your institution. Thank you for joining this strategic briefing. To stay informed on the shifting landscape of global AI governance and its impact on the modern boardroom, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your engagement ensures we can continue to provide clinical, institutional analysis for the global financial C-suite. Until next time.